Good morning from the sports desk. Let's start with this. SAFA's elective congress takes place on Saturday with the presidential position up for grabs. Riale Dwaba and Solly Motlhabeng take on current President Danny Jordan for the coveted seat. To discuss this further, we're joined by goalkeeping legend Brian Spider-Man Baloyi. A very good morning to you, Brian. Thank you for taking time to come into the studio. So it is clear who you're supporting, Riale Dwaba. Why do you think it's time for a change in leadership at SAFA?
It's time for change because, the game has been stagnant for a very long time.
Yeah.
We know that ever since we've won the Nations Cup in '96, it's been a downward spiral. And, a lot of football at development level is dead, schools football in particular. And most of us were products of school football.
Yeah.
And for me, I think, like I said, it's not about who we are supporting, but it's about the principle. And I think what I need to say to South Africans to understand what we're fighting for the soul of South African football.
So the last time, Brian, that South Africa, Bafana qualified for World Cup, for example, was in 2002. 2010, of course, we participated, but that's because we were hosting. What is SAFA getting so wrong for us to say that we haven't qualified for World Cup in 10 years? I mean, what are the issues that need to be looked at?
A lot of issues.
Yeah.
A lot of national coaches that we've had always, identified the problems, and we've never dealt with them. The current coach, for me, everything he said, I agree with him.
Yes.
He's right.
I was going to ask you that.
And I don't understand why he had to apologize for telling the truth. And like I said, a lot of these things that have been highlighted, and we never attend to them, and hence we are where we are.
I was actually going to ask you about Coach Hugo Bross's comments. As you said, he did apologize. But I want to specifically focus on the comment that he made about the standard of the PSL being too low. Do you fully agree with that?
Yes, I mean, it does not need a rocket scientist to see that. If you look at our players in Europe right now, and if you look, what we used to have, it's clear that there is something wrong, and the standard is at a very low. And I mean, on average, a lot of our boys that go to Europe, within 2 years, 3 years, they come back. Most of our senior players that we think that would stick it out and stay in Europe, like your Pesitao. Just now, Bongani Zungu is allegedly coming back to South Africa as well. So, and you look at some of the best nations on the continent, their players are playing in the Premier League. They're playing in Germany. They're playing in France. They're playing in La Liga. And we are nowhere near having players playing in those leagues right now.
So how much of a role do clubs have to play? Because one could argue that clubs should have development structures, breed and groom players, and then feed them to the national team. Am I correct in saying that? And if so, are clubs doing it successfully?
The clubs as well. It's another issue. For me, I think football should be working together, being clubs and the National Association, including government. And until these three bodies start working together, that's the only time we'll start seeing the proper results that we're looking for. In any country, the National Association and the professional league, they speak with one voice. And it hasn't been happening in this country for a very long time, and it's no secret. So I think those are some of the things that needs to be corrected. And the Premier League itself, the clubs themselves as well. Yes, development of players, the clubs have to do their part. But if you look at the two best performing sports in this country professionally, rugby and cricket, development is at school. Development of Springboks, it's at school. Club rugby is not really, a serious competition, similar to cricket. Schools and academies, that's where talent comes from. not from club cricket. Those are some of the things that I believe we should look at and learn from these other sports and try and implement them in football.
Yeah, and development is a big one. And as you mentioned, going back to the grassroots schools football, you know, when you listen to all the candidates and their campaigning, they do talk a lot about developments. But also, if you look back and think about the 2010 World Cup, there was this huge legacy that was spoken of and that was involving, you know, creating fresh talent for the likes of Bafana. Do you think that we should be asking questions about what happened to that legacy of 2010?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to funds, there'll always be questions. But I mean, we've had all of these things. We've had the Vision 2022. Us as the general public, we never had, you know, knew what this Vision 2022 entails. And 2022, now we have Vision 2030. But, you know, this is what I always say, even with club football, that when you're dealing with a sporting club or you know, a national association like this, when you have plans, take the public into confidence.
Yeah.
Let them know what you are, what this vision is all about, so that they become part of it, so that they help in achieving that vision.
Yeah.
But if you want to do it alone, you're not going to achieve anything, because at the end of the day, it's not a team.
Yeah.
You know, it's about the country. And it's about everyone.
So what's needed is transparency, as you're saying.
What's needed is transparency and to take the public into confidence and to get the public to actively involved in achieving what we want to achieve as a country.
Yeah, and we are talking national team. I don't want to just focus on Bafana. There's also Banyana who've been doing incredibly well. I mean, we saw them qualify for the World Cup. We know that they're going to be playing in the Africa Women's Cup of Nations later in the year. They actually were runners-up in the last Africa Cup, Women's Cup of Nations. And Danny Jordan has come out and offered them a huge incentive. Do you think that they can, this time around, win the Africa Women's Cup of Nations? And how much of an influencer, how much of an encourager, if that's a word, will that incentive have on them?
Yeah, I'd say wishing Banyana all the best in the Nations Cup. And I know, you know, they have to get into the semi-finals for them to qualify for the World Cup. They've been runners-up 5 times, you know.
Yeah.
And hopefully this time around, they will bring the trophy home. We know how good they are. Most of them playing overseas. You know, a big chunk of the players. But again, I mean, it's all good and well to come up with such many. But it has to be sustainable.
Absolutely.
You know, coming up with the money again. Where does it come from? Yeah. For me, I'm saying women's football has been doing so well. We need more sponsorships coming into women's football at national level and the league. The Hollywood Super League has been doing well for the last 2 years. And for me, I think it needs to grow. But we need more corporates coming into football. And for me, when you look at football, when you look at the sponsors in football, and when you look at 10 years ago, there was more sponsorship coming into football. And for me, I think there's no reason why corporates cannot be sponsoring, especially women's football.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's all about the offering and what you go to corporates and offering them. Again, as well, it's all about sometimes corporates support the person as well.
Yes.
You know, and who is selling this idea. And so for me, I think we need a big change. And I think with the change, for me, it's just we need a reset.
Yeah.
And most of us, I mean, the last few years, I've been sitting on the marketing and commercial committee at SAFA. And not just me. I mean, there's a few players that have been sitting on other committees, like your technical committee. But for me, it's committees that you know, you don't have anything really to give.
Yeah.
And it's just putting you there just to keep you quiet. And we want to be actively involved in football. And for me, I want to see more former players being involved in the game.
Yeah, well, we're going to leave it there, Brian. The elections are taking place on the 25th of June. That's on Saturday. So looking forward to seeing the outcome of those results. Thank you so much for your time. That was former Bafana goalkeeper Brian Baloyi joining us to look ahead to this weekend's SAFA elective Congress.